Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Story Hour. I'm your host, Daniel Marcus. My unparalleled co-host, Laura Blackwell, has the night off tonight. So it's just me and our guests, of course. So I hope that you're all healthy and safe and taking care of yourselves and your loved ones. We're still in the grip of the pandemic and some real surreal political shit. So I started Story Hour during lockdown last year, at the very beginning of the pandemic. And the idea was just wanted me and my little core group of writer friends to have a place where we could share our work with each other and build a little community and in a very difficult time. And it kind of grew. I mean, we've had well over 150 fabulous authors come through Story Hour and share their work with us since then. So it's really exceeded my initial concept and my expectations, and really couldn't have done this without my fantastic co-host Laura, who, as I said, has the evening off. So the way it works here, we turn to an ancient and time-honored form of entertainment, which is folks sitting around the fire and telling each other lies. And so every week, that's what we do. We've got two authors, about half an hour each, doing exactly that. Minimum of self-promotion, although a little bit is fine. We're writers after all, and that's part of what we do. Tonight, we are very happy to have Michelle Belanger and Mary Berman. So welcome to you both. Thank you very much for joining us. Each week, we also ask our authors to suggest worthy cause, which we will shamelessly shill, say that 3 times fast, on their behalf. So if you're fortunate enough to be in a position to help financially with these causes and you're inspired to do so, that's great. And if you're not, just inform yourselves about them and there might be an opportunity down the road to either help or tell others or whatever. So Mary is reading tonight for Project Home. It's projecthome.org. The mission of the Project Home community is to empower adults, children, and families to break the cycle of homelessness and poverty, to alleviate the underlying causes of poverty, and to enable all of us to attain our fullest potential as individuals and as members of the broader society. Project Home strives to create a safe and respectful environment where we all support each other in our struggles for self-esteem, recovery, and the confidence to move forward towards self-actualization. So that's projecthome.org. Michelle is reading tonight for the Critical Role Foundation. That's critrole.com/foundation. Critical Role Foundation selects and partners with outstanding nonprofit orgs that carry the same values as they do, and work closely alongside them to ensure that every dollar that is raised is going towards programs and projects that are changing the world for the better. So that's Critical Role Foundation, critrole.com/foundation. So on with the show. We're going to start with Mary Berman tonight. Mary is a Philadelphia-based writer of science fiction, fantasy, and horror. She earned her MFA in fiction from the University of Mississippi, and her work has been published in Fireside, Daily Science Fiction, Weird Horror, and elsewhere. In her spare time, she takes fitness classes and antagonizes her cat, who we have met. So you can find her online at www.mtgberman.com. So Mary, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I will be reading tonight my short story, Things Found in Richard Pickman's Basement and Things Left There, which was originally published in the magazine Weird Horror. I have nothing to promote except my cat, who may be walking back and forth across various tabletops and cameras and so on and so forth as we move forward. So I hope she does. I hope everybody gets to experience that. So I'll get started. This is Things Found in Richard Pickman's Basement and Things Left There. Don't be a fool, Thurber. Of course I killed my husband. I suppose you thought that Richard Pickman killed him just because he paints monsters and he's got a house in the North End. I don't suppose you know that I grew up in the North End. Oh, that shocks you, doesn't it? Just imagine a pretty young woman rising from the tangled, shadowed alleyways and subterranean nightmares of the North End, and then insinuating herself among the upper class. The horror. You're such a bore, Thurber. What? Yes, I know about Pickman. You may not recall this. I expect the death of your good friend Elliot is overwhelming you, as you don't seem to be a man who handles stress very well. But a few days ago, you paid a call to my husband, and I happened upon you gossiping about Pickman and his predilections and his North End house. I realized the house you meant at once. It's up on Snow Hill, the big mansion on the corner nearest the graveyard, not very far from Old North Church. It changed hands 3 times when I was a child. Now that Pickman's disappeared, I expect it will do so again. Anyway, Thurber, you haven't asked me the most interesting question. Go on. I know you're dying to. No, not what did I find in Richard Pickman's basement, you imbecile. The real question is, who else did I kill? I killed Susan, my husband's sister, first. This was only about a week ago. Believe it or not, I had never killed anyone before, although, of course, the thought had occurred to me. Doesn't it occur to everyone at some point? No. Well, that's rich coming from you. I understand you committed a number of murders when you were in the war. What do you mean that doesn't count? Anyway, Susan was visiting us from Providence. Really, she was not so much visiting as moving in, no matter what my husband said. She was fresh off a divorce that had left her, let us say, delicate, which is to say she was a fucking nightmare. And since my husband, your dear Elliot, was always off at your little club, I was left to bear the brunt of her. Listen, if you had had to put up with a week of this hoity-toity harridan insisting that you were simpleton, slum trash, uncouth, frigid, unkempt, filthy, that your husband should have left you in the gutter where he found you, never mind that I met him when I was on scholarship at Radcliffe, an achievement that Susan could I am sorry, I got distracted. My point is, you would have had to kill her too. One day, I brought her a plate of bread and butter, trying to make nice, and I found her crying. I suppose she was embarrassed because she started ranting about how civil women understood privacy and manners, but of course the sluts in the North End didn't know enough to teach their daughters such things, and I put the plate on the end table and I walked over to her and I snapped her neck. Necks are surprisingly fragile, you know, snapping one is more about momentum than anything else. Well, then I was in a bind. Thank God my husband was not home. I dragged Susan out of the drawing room and down the stairs and left the corpse at the base of the steps right in the foyer so my husband would trip over it when he came in. I ate the bread and the butter, I put the plate back in the cupboard, and I retired to bed with a cold cloth on my forehead. A while later, the front door opened with a loud bang, the way it always did when my husband had been at the club. Then another bang, as of something very heavy, stumbling and thudding to its fleshy knees. Then a restless silence, and then, at last, a strangled sound, halfway between a gasp and a scream. When he finally fetched me, I told him I'd been in bed with a headache. I feigned astonishment at his shock and his news. Together, we concluded that Susan must simply have fallen down the stairs. It was with my next murder that I made the mistake. No, you ninny, not my husband. We're not there yet. No, this one was the undertaker, Fitzpatrick. I saw him whispering to my husband during Susan's funeral, and it made me itchy. After the funeral, my husband drove home with his knuckles white on the wheel, 2 furious red blotches burning high on his cheeks, and he would not answer me when I asked about his conversation with Fitzpatrick. It was clear to me that Fitzpatrick must have seen evidence of murder on Susan's body, and he must have told my husband that I was the culprit. Needless to say, when Fitzpatrick visited my house the next day, I was already in a state. My husband was not home. He was paying you a call, I believe. I met Fitzpatrick in the drawing room, my mind working furiously. Perhaps I could stab him with the fire. No, too messy. I could strangle him and stuff food in his throat. Too shoddy. I could. I'm so sorry for your loss, Fitzpatrick said. I wondered why he bothered. I apologize for neglecting to offer you my condolences yesterday. You see, I was speaking with your husband. I couldn't stand it. I had to get out of there before I ran him through with the fire poker. I pretended to be overcome with emotion, swiped my hand over my eyes and said I was running to the kitchen to fetch him some refreshment. He didn't pursue me. Perhaps he didn't think I would try to escape. And he was correct, because when I was in the kitchen, I saw the cleaning closet, and in the closet was the arsenic we used for killing rats. I put together a tray of bourbon, coffee, and cheese, and I supplemented the beverages with a hefty dose of poison. I rubbed my eyes until they reddened, and I returned to the sitting room. Fitzpatrick looked relieved to see me. He seized the bourbon gratefully and drained quite a bit more of it than was decent. Mrs. Elliot, he said, I'm afraid I've got something very unpleasant to discuss with you. Please do go on, I said blandly. I expected the poison to make him ill almost immediately, but I did not think he would actually keel over until later than the evening. I was correct about this. It's about your sister-in-law, said Fitzpatrick. Forgive me, I recognize that this is a deeply disagreeable subject, but the neck did not appear to have been broken by a simple fall. I gave him nothing. If the man was about to clap me in chains, the very least I could do was make him uncomfortable first. Fitzpatrick took a deep breath. He said, I think your husband may have murdered Susan. I beg your pardon. Let me explain, said Fitzpatrick. But then his body spasmed once. He clapped his hand to his mouth. All at once he looked quite green. Fitzpatrick fled home to be sick in peace, and I was on tenterhooks for 2 days. I finally learned of his death from you, Thurber. You were in my drawing room. You'd visited to tell my husband that wild story about visiting Richard Pickman's house in the North End and seeing that damned photograph of the ghoul gnawing on a man's head and so forth. I passed by the drawing room to fetch a cup of tea. At that precise moment, you were telling my husband that Fitzpatrick had been found dead in his home the previous morning, that the coroner had determined that he died the evening before. I paused. You and my husband, the dear departed Howard Elliot, were facing the fire. Your heads were tilted closely together, the steep curves of your twin armchairs silhouetted by the low flames. I was enshrouded in the shadows of the hallway. I could not be seen. Heavens, my husband said. What was the cause? Poison, you whispered. Both of you were very quiet. I was even quieter. I expect Pickman did it, you said. Oh, for Pete's sake, Thurber. You haven't seen his house in the North End, and you spun your wild tale. At the time, I didn't believe half of it. Now I know better, of course. As I've said, though, I knew the house you meant. And I have to admit that listening to your conversation enraged me, Thurber. I scorned you, both of you, for being foolish and snobbish and full of fear for your terror at the prospect of leaving your ritzy art clubs and your clean-lined Georgian houses. At least Pickman, I thought, was not afraid. But then I thought about it some more, and I decided that Pickman was no better than my husband, no better than you. Pickman treated my childhood neighborhood like an amusement park. He'd purchased a house there exclusively for the purpose of slumming it for the shock factor so he could horrify his friends at the club. I could not contain myself. I sucked in my breath with anger, and both of you heard me. You looked up. The expression on both of your faces surprised me. It was something very like fear. Then my husband's expression coalesced into anger. He stood. He said my name. You said you ought to be going. You fumbled for your coat. Oh, you do remember this. So you see, Thurber, it's not only my fault your friend Elliot is dead. It's your fault too. You should have stayed. My husband saw you out and returned a minute later to the drawing room. I was waiting for him. I knew how this scene by necessity would play out. Frankly, I rather relished it. He demanded of me, what's gotten into you? What's gotten into me? What's gotten into Mr. Thurber? Never mind, Mr. Thurber. You disrespected me by eavesdropping on my private conversation. You embarrassed me in front of my good friend and a member of the club. Oh, you and the club. I'm not ashamed to tell you I snapped at him. I was still angry from your breathless, half-titillated description of the North End, and angry too with my blind, useless, spineless husband, who always spent half his time at the club and the other half with you in a decanter. Thurber's too busy having a nervous breakdown to worry about you. He shan't tell anyone. Mr. Thurber, my husband corrected me. I did not say anything. My husband said my name loud and insistent and brash. Still, I said nothing. I would not even look him in the face. I was so angry. He came over to me and sank his fingers into the flesh of my upper arm. It hurt. Answer me, he said. Why were you eavesdropping on us? Mr. Thurber was talking about the demons in Richard Pickman's basement, I said evenly. It isn't the sort of thing you overhear every day. I was interested. Note that I did not apologize. It's important to me that people know that. How long were you standing there? I did not answer. Did you hear us talking of Fitzpatrick's death? I did not answer. He died 2 evenings ago, of poisoning. How terrible, I said. My husband's fingernails made half moons in my body. You heard us, and Thurber said that Fitzpatrick was here at our house the day he died. That means he must have visited with you. And Fitzpatrick told me at the funeral that Susan looked like she'd had her neck broken. Why? I asked very quietly. Don't you say the thing you want to say? My husband shook me. You'd better tell me what you know right now. You'd better not order me around again. How dare you, He had not accused me of the murders. Was he really so stupid that he couldn't put two and two together? Or did he not want to believe it? Or was he simply incapable of understanding that his young, pretty, soft, small wife, whose upper arm fit entirely in his grasp, could be a killer? I didn't care. I was beyond caring. This man would never lay his hands on me again. With my free hand, I removed my hairpin and stabbed him through the jugular. After I cleaned up the blood and changed my clothes, I thought about where to hide the body. At once, I thought of your story about Richard Pickman, his house by the graveyard, the well in his basement. But Snow Hill was 2 miles north. How would I get the body there? I couldn't exactly summon a taxi. In the attic, I found a great wheeled trunk. We'd only used it twice, once when traveling to Europe in 1922, and then again last summer when we'd visited Susan in Providence. I dragged the trunk down to the drawing room, folded my husband up. I had to break some of his joints to make him fit, and stuffed him inside. Then I took the revolver out of his study and put it in my pocket, and I set off. I was a woman walking alone at night, you know. It was safer to have a gun. I didn't need it, though, not until later. It was past midnight by now, and I encountered very few people. Navigation was easier once I reached the north end. Even after all these years, the alleys of that neighborhood are as familiar to me as my features in the mirror. And the house, Richard Pickman's house, its gabled roof is impenetrable as the face of a mountain, its cracked windows hollow like eyes. That was familiar too. I breathed a sigh of relief when I saw it. The front door was locked, but the wooden door frame had rotted through, so I broke in easily. In the pitch dark foyer, I dropped the trunk and rested for a moment. For one thing, I was exhausted and sore. It is no joke lugging a grown man around Boston, but for another, I was trying to get a sense of my surroundings. It'd be awfully rich if I made it all the way to Pickman's house and then broke my neck going down the stairs. Eventually, when my eyes failed to adjust, I began feeling my way around the walls, searching for the doorway or a light switch. The walls were not wood or brick, but some thick, flexible stuff. And then, what luck, I found an oil lamp and a pack of matches. I lit the lamp. I stared around. Frankly, Thurber, when I saw that room, I understood what you had been so hot and bothered about. The walls were plastered with canvases. Pickman had painted great black furred beasts slavering in the graveyard by the house, feeding on long dead corpses beside exhumed and open coffins. He'd painted them stealing infants from their cradles in the night. There were lots of shadows and rotting flesh and teeth. There was a whole series of a person with Pickman's own face mutating into a fanged and vicious animal. In the center of the room, there was a massive portrait, very fresh, with a ghoul with human-eyed face and shambling gait. Each hair on his body was picked out with the delicacy of an eyelash, and it was eating a human body like a lollipop. Was that the painting that sent you running for cover, Thurber? It was very easy to look at that painting and think that the monster was real. I remember wondering if it would have any interest in my husband's corpse. At last, I found the basement stairs, thunked down them with my trunk. At the bottom, Richard Pickman was waiting for me. For Lord's sake, Thurber, don't scream like that. You have to remember, I had never actually met him before. To me, he was just a hunched, hollow-eyed, middle-aged man, although he was standing with his feet spread in a fighting stance, and he was pointing a revolver at me. I dropped the trunk instantly, grabbed my own gun, but Pickman was already lowering his. He frowned hard for a second, and then he said, "Mrs. Elliott? You must be Richard Pickman," I said. "You are Mrs. Elliott." I did not see the point in answering this. I was looking around the cellar. It was brighter down here, with a number of lanterns and candles. The room was papered with sketches and works in progress, which were more or less as revolting as the paintings upstairs. Hanging on the corner of an easel was Pickman's camera, and there, in the center of the room, was the great crumbling stone well with its wooden cover. Pickman put his gun down on the rim of the well and came toward me. I stepped back. My mind was working furiously. Evidently, I would have to kill Pickman, but I could see that he was made of stronger stuff than my husband and Fitzpatrick and Suzanne. He would put up a fight. I tightened my hold on the gun, preparing. A thump sounded from the well. I tensed. Pickman whirled. He fumbled for something in his clothes. The wooden cover slid half off the well, and a set of claws hooked itself over the rim. Thurber, I had never seen anything like those claws. They were 2 inches long, gunmetal gray, smooth and curved like a cat's. Pickman was still searching for something, and then he stopped. "My revolver," he said anxiously. It rested on the rim of the well 10 feet away. An oblong, furred, humanoid head poked out over the claws. I saw a flat, puggish nose, a wide mouth, a pair of eyes the color of hot coals. and then a lanky skeletal body with ribs and a collarbone that jutted out like pens or blades. The creature placed a single foot, long and flat like a wolf's paw, on the rim of the well. It bared fangs, and Thurber, those fangs should not have fit in its mouth, and they were dripping, thick with saliva, maybe blood. I screamed. It's embarrassing to admit now, but what can you do? And I shot it in the neck. The animal? The animal howled and careened backward into the well. My muscles were coiled like springs. I could hear nothing but the sound of my own blood. I strained for the sound of the creature's body colliding with the well bottom, but I never heard it. Pickman exhaled shakily. Then he rounded on me and shouted, "What are you doing in my house?" Well, I felt that the fact that he was hiding a monster in his basement changed the terms of the game somewhat. So I told him, "I'm disposing of a body." "I beg your pardon." "I killed my husband. I killed his sister Susan and Fitzpatrick the Undertaker as well, while we're on the subject. Pickman, what is in that well?" "Mr. Pickman, if you please, Mrs. Elliott." "Christ almighty," I said. I pocketed the revolver and, ignoring Pickman, dragged my trunk over to the well. But when I peered cautiously into it, I saw nothing but darkness. I dropped the oil lamp, hoping it would illuminate the bottom of the well when it broke. Instead, it vanished into the shadows. Pickman came and stood next to me. "Where does it go?" I asked, unable to help myself. Pickman hesitated. Then he said, "It leads to Carter's dreamlands." "Thurber, does that mean anything to you?" "No, me neither. Still, I imagined it was probably difficult to track a dead body there." I unbuckled the trunk and hoisted my husband out of it. His broken limbs dangled like cut strings. Richard Pickman reared back from me in horror. I heaved the body over the edge of the well and watched it fall, and that was that. I turned and met Pickman's eyes. He was staring at me uneasily, having turned away from me slightly as from a hot fire. It's true, you know, that there's something queer about his features, and his shoulders are rather too hunched and his gait too shambling, even for an aging man who spends half his time hunched over a canvas. In a rather wondering sort of tone, he said to me, "You look human." "I should hope so," I said stiffly. "So you haven't been to..." I waited. Pickman rubbed a claw-like hand over his thinning hair. At last he said, "Mrs. Elliott, you cannot dispose of your corpses in my basement." I looked at the canvases, the yawning well, Pickman's weird shifting face. I asked, "What are you going to do about it?" Richard Pickman said nothing. I left. Well, I never made it home, of course. Someone had heard the gunshots and called the police, who were gathering outside. They saw me staggering out of the old house with filth and bloodstains on my dress. They brought me in for questioning, and someone realized my connection to Susan and Fitzpatrick, and here I am in a cell. But guess what, Thurber? They're going to let me go. I blamed everything on Pickman. I left the gun in the bloodstained trunk in his house, thank God, and Pickman disappeared after I left his basement, so he's not around to claim they aren't his. The police went inside to investigate and saw the paintings and the weapons in the well. Such horror, such strangeness. Everyone believes he did it. But here's the real reason they're going to let me go. I'm young and pretty and soft and small. Yes, I know I've just confessed everything to you. But I'll ask you the question I asked Richard Pickman. What are you going to do about it? Go on then if you want to. Tell them everything. But I know you won't, because you want them to catch that twisted old man. You're more afraid of him than you are of me. Even with the story you've just heard, you think you've got more to fear from an artist and his ghouls than a young woman with a hairpin and a trunk. You poor, dear, stupid man. You've got a lot to learn. That's it. It is also worth noting, probably should have slapped this in the old introduction, but that this story is based very heavily on a Lovecraft story called Pickman's Model. So if the well monsters and the paintings interested you and you haven't read that story, definitely check it out. Thanks.
That was awesome. Thank you so much. That was great. It was a great story, but I also really, really enjoy the energy of your reading.
Appreciate it.
So thank you.
Thank you.
So typically we just wait 5 or 10 seconds before moving to the next writer, just to kind of pause, take a breath, shift gears, and kind of let the work sink in and get ready for the next person. So let's do that for a moment. just breathe together and chill for a sec. All right, on to our next author. Michelle Belanger is an occult expert, presenter, singer, media personality, psychic, and author of over 30 books on paranormal and occult topics. Michelle has been featured on TV shows, including Annie's Paranormal State and the Travel Channel's Portals to Hell as a psychic medium and occult expert. Michelle offers classes and weekend retreats on psychic development at Inspiration House in Oberlin, Ohio, a 150-year-old house with the coziest haunting you could hope to find. To learn more about Michelle's work, start by exploring www.michellebelanger, MICHELLEBELANGER.com. And there you will find books, music, and classes, both online and at Inspiration House. You can follow her on Twitter and at Seth Anikim, SETHANIKEEM, on YouTube, the same name, or join Michelle's community at Patreon/haunted. Michelle, take it away.
Okay, I don't have a whole lot that I really care to promote, so I will simply say that this is an older one, and it was first published in Dark Realms magazine. It was part of a challenge to write a story inspired by a song without ever mentioning the song directly. And if you are of a certain age, you might catch it pretty quickly. It's called In Dreams. He came to her in dreams. Not every night, no, that would have been too kind. Instead, he teased her with his presence, coming every once in a while, seducing her twice in 1 week, and then disappearing for almost a month at a time. The dreams, when she had them, were wonderful. In her waking hours, she would hear the velvet of his voice, feel the soft breath against her ear, the memory of his words so vivid that it drowned out every other sound on her morning ride to work. And his touch. Whenever he came to her at night, all the next day, she could feel him still, like soft electric fire burning in her skin. Sometimes she would sit at her desk for hours, staring blankly at the computer screen, enwrapped in the memory of his hands. At home, she played her songs to while away the hours till she could sleep again. All our times have come. Sleep was the sweetest part of her day. She did not know him, this strange dream lover. His face was one she had never seen in the waking world. Those high sculpted cheekbones, the thin, perfect nose, lips that seemed chiseled from living stone. He was pale, pale as the moon in her dreams, and it seemed that his skin nearly glowed like an alabaster lamp lit from within. Jet black hair like a raven's wing spilled over his forehead and down the back of his neck. His eyes, too, were black, or so it seemed. In the dreams, these held a strange dark light, and she could never gaze on them for very long. Each time, he would simply appear in her 12th floor apartment, moving from the balcony to the side of her bed. She never asked how he got there. Perhaps he was able to fly. It was, after all, a dream. And yet, how vivid, how sensuous these dreams, until she felt that she truly had a lover, even though this lover had no name. Months into this strange seduction, she began to go out looking for him. Somehow, she knew to seek him in the night places. She went to the bars and the dance clubs, dressing in velvet and slick vinyl boots. Over the weeks, she saw many strange, pale people. Once or twice, she thought she spied him, but then the young man would turn and the cheek wasn't right, or the eyes were too dim. It seemed like he was always one step ahead of her, and she could feel his presence lingering everywhere she went. If a club wasn't open, she would wander Greenwich Village, watching people walk their dogs in Washington Park. Sometimes she could feel him moving behind her, but then she would turn and there was nothing but shadows and the sound of the wind. She knew he was teasing her, leading her along in some deft seduction. The harder she sought him in the waking world, the longer it would be before he returned to her dreams. She had resigned herself to being patient sometime after the leaves began to fall. It was getting too cold to sit all night in the park, although she would still sometimes go out to the clubs. The chill of November was in the air the night she lost her wallet. She had money in her pocket, but it wasn't enough to pay for a cab. With a bitter wind coming off the Atlantic, she didn't relish the thought of walking 10 blocks home. So she found the F train and tried to look inconspicuous as she waited on the platform, shivering in her fishnets and her thin vinyl cloak. It was a Sunday night. She expected the train to be empty, but instead it had a crowd. It was nothing compared to the hordes on the morning commute, but she still had to work to find herself a seat. Several people were standing, fingers twined in the loops overhead. Others lay across the seats, finding shelter and warmth on the train's endless ride. Of course, as she sat there, her mind strayed to him. She gazed out the window, not even seeing the shadowed, stained walls as they sped past her eyes. She was focused so completely on her internal landscape that she almost didn't see the pale face reflected beside her in the grime-smeared glass. But for some reason, her eye caught the image and stuck. It took a moment for the landscape of that face to sink in. He was sitting on the other side of the train from her, his dark eyes focused on something far away. She turned around, half expecting him not to be there when she looked. Like some phantasm, she feared that he existed only in the glass. But there he was. The lights of the subway played upon his pallor till it seemed he should glow from within. The train plunged into a tunnel, rattling wildly upon its tracks. Yet he hadn't disappeared. You! I know you! She couldn't help herself. The words echoed through the train. Slowly, he turned and regarded her. Those strange dark eyes seemed to sizzle on her skin. Hush, he said, drawing his dark coat about him. Don't make a scene. I'll come to you tomorrow, just before the morning. The train was jerking to a halt. He stood, and it was as if the train was moving for everyone but him. His hands were in his pockets, and he didn't even seem to brace his legs. Yet so effortlessly he rose and glided to a door. She sat riveted to her seat, her eyes unblinking, fixed on him. She wanted to run after him, but he was out and the door was closed before she could get her legs to work. Her heart fluttered against her ribs like a panicked bird in a cage. It was only after he exited the train that she realized his lips had never moved. Tonight, she thought, and stared through the letters on the screen. Tonight, just before morning. In agony, she struggled to focus on her work. His voice had been exactly like it was in her dreams, but had she dreamed that too? His lips had never moved. The other passengers, though they reacted to her outburst, seemed insensible to him. And the way he glided, as if gravity held no power over him. The train could have shaken itself off its tracks, and he would have been standing there calm and poised, with everyone else thrown to the floor about him. What was he? All those weeks, all those months, that question had never come. Had she never wondered? Or had she been afraid to ask? Was there any chance that he would have answered as he whispered to her at night? No. He spoke to her in dreams, but it was the language of the bedroom. In all the time he had been coming to her, she had not even learned his name. The day dragged on, and then it was evening, and she made a point of taking the train. She searched the faces, but of course he wasn't there. Just before morning, she stopped at the vegetarian diner a block from her building, but she couldn't eat. Every time the door opened, she almost jumped up, looking for him. The elevator ride up to her apartment was torture. There were 5 other people, all standing too close. And of course, the worst of it was none of them were him. She stripped out of her work clothes and took a hot bath, but the steam and the scent of lavender did nothing at all to soothe her. Those eyes, those high, pale cheekbones. She turned on the computer and surfed the net. She found herself checking social media over and over again, desperately searching for some new topic, some line of conversation that could occupy her mind. In the reflection of her face on the screen, she could almost see him. At 9 o'clock, she took off her bathrobe and slipped on her black lace gown. She turned off all the lights, but left one candle burning, a lone tea light in a votive holder that glimmered on her nightstand. She lay on her back among the pillows. She stared at the ceiling, and the flickering flame of the tea light made the patterns in the plaster come alive. What was she waiting for? Should she sleep? Or did he mean he'd really come, for the first time more flesh than dream? 11 o'clock found her tossing, her long red hair tangled on the pillowcase. Midnight came and went. She got up and put on music, hoping the quiet tones would ease the weight. The clock seemed to draw her eyes to it every quarter hour. She turned her face away and then would look again. 1:30, 1:45, 2 a.m. Sometime, she dozed. She woke to a sound on the balcony. Somehow she heard it over all the city noise. A gust of chilly wind greeted her as she sat up, kissing her skin through the thin lace of her gown. There was a light out there. She could see it glowing faintly through the muslin of the curtains. 12 floors below, motors growled and horns blared. 4:30 in the morning. New York was never asleep. She pushed the covers back and placed bare feet upon the floorboards. The chill brought her more awake. She was awake. She was sure of it. This was no dream. And then, beyond the curtain, a figure moved. The soft glow upon the balcony marked his stately silhouette. He was thin, so thin and delicate, yet she knew the strength that vibrated in those limbs. He didn't have to call to her. She threw open the doors. He leaned against the balcony railing, arms crossed upon his chest. The wind blew his hair about him, and she thought of ravens taking flight. She ran to him, her arms outstretched. She had no words for the joy she felt, the profound sense of completion. When he moved, the wind caught the edges of his long silk trench. It made a sound, again, like wings. And then the wings were everywhere, and the wind and the lights of the city as they streamed by like a river that had burst its banks, and the stars that were street lamps and the stars in the sky, everything went topsy-turvy until finally she felt herself in his arms like she was able to fly. Then suddenly they stood on the pavement, 12 floors below the balcony's edge. She could still see the cars and the street lights, but the sounds were distant and muffled. Even the sirens were quiet as they came, heralded by flashing lights. I can be with you, she murmured, breathless. You are with me, he said. She felt his hands squeezing her shoulders. They were cold, but they were his. She laid her head against his chest. She heard only the wind. You have no heartbeat, she whispered. No, he said. I never have. Softly he stroked her hair. She gazed up at him and found she could meet those dark and distant eyes at last. How did we get here? She wondered. I mean, down here, on the street. He pointed at the pavement behind her. She almost didn't look. The flashing lights were a blur around her. The cars and the screaming people were hazy and indistinct. It was like standing in an impressionist's painting of the city, everything too blurry to be real. How did that happen? She asked. She cringed away from the sight, clinging to his chest. Isn't that what you wanted? He responded. You wanted to be with me. To be with you, she sighed. His arms were cold around her, but still she found comfort in that embrace. Take me away from it, she pleaded. Take me away from it all. They turned away from the calamity on the pavement, abandoning the scattered detritus of her former life. Her hand, in his hand, empty, unburdened, she leapt into death and danced away on the wind.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That was lovely. Also beautifully written, you know. We get a lot of great authors coming through here, but not all of them are great readers. But both of you really kind of inhabited your stories, and just really great readings. So thank you.
And if people are curious, Blue Oyster Cult.
Right on. Man, that takes me back. You know, Laura and I remark almost every week that you know, we don't arrange to have stories of a common type read, but almost every week there is some kind of connective thread. Sometimes it's overt, sometimes it's kind of subtle and nonlinear. But I feel like these stories are related in some sense, thematically. I'm not sure I could articulate that better without giving it more thought, but I feel like the program tonight was very sort of unified and whole. So lovely work. Thank you both. Thank you for coming, and thank you all for joining us once again at Story Hour, spending your Wednesday evening with us, or a bit of it. Next week, we're very happy to have Amy Gretsch and Rachel Unger. So between now and then, take care of yourselves, stay safe, take care of each other, and we will see you next time. Thanks again to our wonderful authors. Good night, everybody.